everybody. Thank you so much for coming to chat with me today. I'm Lorna. I do stuff with the OpenAPI initiative. Sometimes I do a day job as well, but I'm not doing one right now. So I have lots of time to think more about APIs. I have seen APIs from every direction. I've built APIs, integrated with APIs, consumed APIs, written about APIs, consulted on APIs. Worked for a tools vendor. I am so excited to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about API governance, and you've heard a lot about this already. I have been so encouraged by the earlier sessions talking about what is API governance and lots of mentions of, the people, the processes. I'm going to talk a little bit about tools today, but I'm also going to talk about standards. I think API governance should be benevolent bureaucracy, right? It should be something that gives you structure to be effective. I am passionate about developer experience, and good API governance just makes this process easier for producers and for consumers. There are lots of developers who are not necessarily API specialists. They're expected to ship APIs. They work on this bit of the application. They're expected to do something that's consistent with the rest of the API surface. Whether you're doing APIs internally or externally, I hope I have something here that will help you. So let's start by talking a little bit about standards. Obviously, I think OpenAPI is super important. That is why I spend so much of my time working on it, with it, around it, telling people about it. OpenAPI is a machine-readable way of describing your HTTP APIs. I think of it as being something that we can use to describe the whole API, but then also to put it through different filters and have different lenses. So you might add something for an SDK generator or a docs output or an API gateway, or you might remove something to hide those API endpoints that are not ready yet. So your OpenAPI really isn't an output format. And I always advocate for teams to be design first. And when you are design first, you are taking everything you want to do in your API, and you're making those changes as early in the process as possible. This is really important for APIs. In software, we can ship things and iterate and see how it goes and scale it later. And in APIs, we cannot ship things and iterate. We have to get it right. When it goes out the door, then we're committed to it. Perhaps not until the end of time, but for some good chunk of time. So by shifting that design and decision-making process to the left, getting it right as early as possible while you're still only changing the OpenAPI file, then the rest of the process follows quite easily. OpenAPI is a great standard, and there are other standards that can help you. And what I like about that is it gives that consistency, and it allows you to build on the prior art and the best practice in the industry. So these are things that these are great starting points for you to adopt and to include in your API guidelines and your API practice. OpenAPI, of course, but also within your OpenAPI, standard error formats. RFC 9457 is the new RFC 7807, so that's the error JSON problem format that you might have seen already. This is familiar, lots of libraries support it. You'll be able to get some ready-made rules for checking it. It's a nice addition to a consistent API. Please don't invent auth. This is such a sore point for me because I feel like it's something I fix on every project I do. Please use existing authentication methods. If you have a note from your mother excusing you from using OAuth 2, then okay, I'll permit JWT or other established standards, but try not to invent stuff. There's a lot of really good work out there by people who care about this stuff, and the standards can really help you. I also want to mention HAL, which is Hypertext Application Language. This is a really extensible It's a lot if you use all of it, but you pick a mix way of including links and URLs alongside your resources. If you have seen an API that has like a self link or some pagination, that was HAL, and you should look it up and not reinvent it once. Let's talk about the people who are in your design first governance process. I call them the API Council, which sounds really grand. It's very difficult to generalize about who the job titles in the room should be because it's different in every organization. And the knowledge can be in different teams depending. But you need to look for, you probably want your product owner. You need some technical people. So bring in your architect, your tech lead, or the engineer that cares the most about this stuff. Bring in someone who can represent the customer's point of view. Or the consumer's point of view. So this is going to be developer experience, developer relations, someone like that. You also need your technical writer in the room as early as possible. Why? Because if you let them write the examples and descriptions and name things, you're way more likely to build the right thing at the end of the process. Every change you make, yes, we're going to do some automated tooling, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but get the humans in a room or virtually in a room and ask them, would you want to use it like this? Is it consistent with what we have? Have we named everything correctly? This is the magic. The tooling is not the answer, but it can definitely help. When I'm working on that design first thing, it can be hard to imagine the API. So I love to have reference documentation and the mock servers in place just as part of the preview build for the API change pull request. You're also going to want a linter. My top recommendation is that the correct rule set to use is not the recommended rule set. I recommend never using the recommended rule set. We have gone wrong as an industry. In the rule sets we recommend, please build your own rule set or choose one from a sane person. And think about where you are and where you want to go. What's achievable for the project that you're working on? So if you have no automated linting standards enforcement at all, start with, is this document valid? Just because you're using a reputable OpenAPI tool doesn't necessarily mean that your document will be valid. At the next level, does it meet your basic standards? And this might be compliance standards. So we might need a certain amount of metadata for your API catalog, your discovery, the way your deployment processes work, a license, those sorts of things. But it might be security or it might be industry-specific compliance. Level 2 is for consistency, and this is where your camel case, kebab case, plurals, URL segments, and all those other namings and kind of patterns go. Write as many rules as you can. Start with the stuff you're already doing that will pass, because that means that the next thing you build will be consistent. Level 3, is it a joy? Does everything have an example, a description? Is it easy to pick up? We've talked a bit about how OpenAPI governance works as a process. We've talked about the people involved. I've advocated for some of the standards that you can build on to give you a quick start, to have stuff that's already there for you to use. But really, this is about you looking at where you are and looking at where you want to be, and making each aspect that you can a little bit better. I said it at the beginning, it's benevolent bureaucracy. It's here to help you, to support you, to make things structured and smooth. And I hope that will really give you some ideas that you can use in your own work. So I am done. This is where you can get in touch with the stuff I've talked about. We've got the Open APIs project. We've got my own blog where I write about a lot of this stuff and link to the other things that I am doing. And there's a list of tools there at OpenAPI tools. There are too many for me to mention, so go and check that out yourself. I am done. Thank you so much for joining me and enjoy the rest of the conference.